There's a brutal truth most people avoid. We waste our lives not because we don't have enough time, but because we believe we always will. We wake up, we scroll, we postpone, we complain, and suddenly you vanish like smoke. The ancients saw this clearly. Seneca warned, "You act like mortals in what you fear and like immortals in what you desire." That line still stings, because it describes the contradiction in how we live today, terrified of losing, yet careless with the only resource we cannot replace, time. Let me give you 3 uncomfortable hooks to shake you out of that illusion. First, your phone isn't stealing your time. You are handing it over, minute by minute, in exchange for distraction. Nobody robbed you. You gave it away. Second, you think you're safe because tomorrow is waiting. But tomorrow is an illusion. It's a promise that has deceived billions before you. It tells you there's more time left, yet silently kills your urgency. Third, you secretly hope someone will rescue you. A mentor, a partner, a sudden lucky break. But no one is coming. If you keep waiting for a savior, life will pass by, and you'll die with your song still trapped inside. That's the brutal starting point. And here is where Stoicism comes in, not as some ancient, dusty philosophy, but as a code designed for warriors of any era. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, reminded himself at dawn, "I rise to perform my rule as a human, not as emperor, not as ruler, as human." Why? Because the highest calling isn't about status or applause. It's about fulfilling your unique potential before time runs out. This channel, StoicCraft, exists for that reason. Not to hand you motivational sugar rushes that fade tomorrow, but to deliver frameworks that bite, that demand something from you, that push you to act. We're not here to romanticize Stoicism, we're here to use it as a tool for building. A tool for clarity, discipline, resilience, and freedom. So let's paint the picture clearly. Many people around you have stopped evolving. They go through their routines. They eat, they scroll, they repeat. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, financially, they're stagnant. Their comfort has turned into a cage. And because their cage has golden bars, steady jobs, constant entertainment, daily conveniences, they don't even notice they're trapped. But you feel it. Deep inside, there's a fire still flickering. A whisper that says, "I was made for more." That whisper is why you're here. And my rule is to make sure you don't negotiate with it. I'm not going to flatter you with you're perfect the way you are. You're not. None of us are. You are unfinished clay. And every day you delay molding yourself, the clay hardens. So we need to start shaping. Think about this. Time isn't stolen. It's traded. Every moment you spend arguing online, binge watching content that adds nothing, scrolling through lives that aren't yours, that is a trade. You've given up an opportunity to build your strength, your vision, your craft. And unlike money, and like possessions, time doesn't refund. Once it's gone, it's gone. That's why procrastination is more dangerous than laziness. Laziness is obvious. You lie down. You admit you're not doing anything. But procrastination is sneaky. It disguises itself as preparation, as planning, as "I'll start when I feel ready." It sounds rational. And that's exactly why it ruins lives silently. You don't notice you're losing until you've lost decades. Oliver Wendell Holmes once wrote, "Most people die with their music still in them." Think about that. The books unwritten, the businesses never built, the relationships never deepened, the potential never touched. That's the price of delay. The Stoics rejected this. They embrace urgency but not panic. They taught deliberate action over grand bursts of inspiration. They practiced voluntary hardship so they would never be softened by comfort. They guarded their minds like sacred ground, filtering what entered their attention. They refused to let noise dictate their peace. This is what we're here to learn. This is the strategy. Over the next 10 principles, I will walk you through brutal truths and practical disciplines that will strip away the lies you've been living under. Lies like later is safer, comfort is peace, reaction is power, and explanations are necessary. Each truth is going to feel heavy, because it will demand responsibility. But each truth is also a key to a life you design, rather than one you inherit by default. Here's what you need to understand before we dive in. If you keep living passively, you will eventually carry the heaviest weight imaginable, not failure, not poverty, not rejection, but regret. Regret is heavier than all of those combined, because it's irreversible. Epictetus, born a slave and later one of the most respected teachers in history, asked the question that should haunt anyone still waiting to begin. How long are you going to wait before you demand the best of yourself? That's not rhetorical. That's directed at you right now. How much longer are you going to rehearse instead of perform? How much longer will you keep negotiating with your own weakness? The truth is, you've delayed enough. Today isn't just another square on the calendar. Today is the only place you can act. So as we step into these 10 Stoic disciplines, don't listen as if you're consuming more content. Listen as if this is a mirror, as if each principle is a tool being handed to you. Use it or ignore it, but if you ignore it, know that tomorrow will look exactly like today, and the next year will look like the last. If you're ready, if that inner fire is still alive, then lean in. These principles are not theories. They are practices. They are choices. They are repetitions. And if you apply them, not someday, not when life feels easier, but now, your life will transform not overnight, not by magic, but brick by brick, decision by decision. This is your wake-up call. This is your alarm clock, not a gentle melody, but a bell that shakes the walls. It's time to stop bargaining with your life. It's time to stop waiting for permission. It's time to build. Now, let's begin with the first principle. Don't bargain with your own procrastination. Procrastination is the silent thief of potential. It doesn't announce itself with a loud warning. It whispers softly, not now. Tomorrow, later, when things feel easier. And because that whisper sounds harmless, even reasonable, we obey it. Day after day, until we look back and realize we've built a lifetime of delays instead of a life of meaning. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world during his time, wrote to himself, "When you don't want to rise in the morning, recall this thought. I rise to perform my rule as a human." Notice what he didn't write. He didn't say emperor. He didn't say ruler. He said human, because even the emperor knew the greatest battle wasn't fought on a battlefield, but in the mind, in the tiny moments when comfort tempts us to bargain with ourselves. Think about your mornings. The alarm goes off. Instantly, the negotiation begins. 5 more minutes. I'll wake up earlier tomorrow. I deserve this. Or take your health you promised to exercise. But the inner voice convinces you to push it to next week. You meant to learn a new skill, but scrolling endlessly feels easier and gives you the illusion of progress. Each time you choose comfort over commitment, something invisible corrodes your self-respect. That's the real danger. Not just the time lost, but the erosion of trust in yourself. You start to see yourself as someone with good intentions but weak follow-through. Someone who makes promises but rarely keeps them. And the more you negotiate with your laziness, the louder that identity becomes. The Stoics never equated discipline with punishment. To them, discipline was honor. It was the deep satisfaction of knowing you stood by yourself when every part of you wanted to escape responsibility. Each time you kept a promise, no matter how small, you were building a fortress of trust within yourself. And that trust is where real confidence is born. Now, let's break this down. Laziness comes in many forms. Physical laziness, avoiding movement, dodging effort. Mental laziness convincing yourself that planning is the same as doing. Emotional laziness putting off difficult conversations, staying in draining environments because growth feels uncomfortable. And spiritual laziness, the refusal to evaluate whether your actions align with your values. Every time you surrender to one of these forms, the pattern deepens. It becomes easier the next time, until it feels natural. But the opposite is also true. Every time you resist, every time you push through, discipline strengthens. The Stoics practiced this intentionally. They called it voluntary hardship, rising early when sleep tempted them, training their bodies when they ached, eating plainly when indulgence was available, not because they enjoyed suffering, but because they knew, if you conquer the small battles daily, you're prepared for the wars life will inevitably bring. Ask yourself honestly, what is procrastination costing you right now? Maybe it's time, the only resource you cannot recover. Maybe it's opportunities while you hesitate. Someone with less talent, but more discipline is stepping forward. Maybe it's confidence every broken promise to yourself chips away at your belief that you can follow through. And maybe, worst of all, it's draining your future not in one dramatic collapse, but in slow daily erosion. That's why the Stoics insisted. Control yourself before life forces control upon you. If you wait for motivation, you'll wait forever. The perfect time doesn't exist. The only time is now. So how do we cut procrastination out? First, expect resistance. Don't be shocked when your body and mind scream for comfort. Everyone faces the resistance. Even Marcus Aurelius faced it. The difference between those who succeed and those who stall isn't the absence of resistance, it's how they respond. Second, build systems, not moods. Don't depend on how you feel. Set routines that carry you even when you're tired, bored, or uninspired. Think of discipline like autopilot. Habits become your engine, not emotions that reduce temptation. Willpower is limited. Don't fight constant battles against your environment. If you want to read more, put your phone in another room. If you want to eat clean, don't buy junk food. If you want to train consistently, lay out your gear the night before. Build an environment that supports the life you want. Fourth, reframe discomfort. Stop seeing it as punishment. See it as evidence you're growing. The ache from training, that's strength building. The frustration of learning, that's your brain rewiring. The tension of a hard conversation, that's courage forming. Pain is proof of progress. And here's something important. Forgive yourself for past procrastination. You can't rewrite yesterday, but you can draw the line today. The upgraded version of you does not negotiate with laziness. When the alarm rings, you rise. When you're tired, you still act. When you're unmotivated, you still move. That's what separates the disciplined from the drifting. The Stoics understood that freedom doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. Freedom comes from self-mastery. Comfort is a golden cage. Discipline is the escape key. And every time you resist procrastination, you're not just getting a task done, you're proving to yourself that you are someone who can be trusted. So here's your challenge. No more deals with weakness. No more inner negotiations that say, tomorrow. Every time you feel that voice rising, answer it with action. Even the smallest action. Because one small action repeated daily becomes unstoppable momentum. Say this now and mean it. I refuse to negotiate with laziness. This is where your transformation begins. And once you build that momentum, you'll be ready to face the next challenge. Discovering brutal honesty about your true purpose, you can win the battle against procrastination. But if you don't know what you're aiming for, all your victories will feel hollow. That is the second brutal truth the Stoics pressed upon us. You must be ruthlessly honest about your purpose. Without it, your life becomes motion without progress, activity without meaning, noise without a melody. Most people are not failing because they lack discipline or intelligence. They are failing because they are wandering without a destination. They wake up every day, check their phones, sit through meetings, rush from one task to another, yet remain in the same place they were a year ago. They confuse busyness with significance, and that confusion eats entire decades. Seneca once said that if you don't know to which port you are sailing, no wind is favorable. Imagine a ship endlessly adjusting its sails, busy with ropes and maps, but circling the same patch of water because the captain never chose a destination. That's how most of us live, working hard, but toward nothing that matters. Inherited dreams from family, expectations from culture, the subtle comparisons planted by society, all of these become scripts we follow without asking if they belong to us. You may climb the ladder of success only to discover, too late, that it is leaning against the wrong wall. The Stoics demanded confrontation with this reality. Marcus Aurelius journaled each morning not to inspire himself, but to interrogate his motives. He asked hard questions. What am I truly here for? Where am I drifting into vanity? Which actions today will align with virtue rather than ego? This wasn't pleasant reflection. It was surgical honesty, and it gave him clarity to lead an empire without being consumed by it. The modern world makes clarity harder than ever. Our feeds overflow with distraction, comparison, noise. Everywhere, someone is selling you a vision of what your life should look like. If you don't define your purpose, the world will gladly define it for you. And when you let others design your direction, their priorities become your prison. That is why most people feel drained without knowing why. They are working tirelessly to build someone else's dream. Clarity is not a what-time exercise. It is a daily discipline. It is sitting quietly with yourself and asking, who am I becoming by repeating the choices I make each day? If I live the same way for another year, will I admire the person I become? What do I value above all else? And what do I tolerate that betrays those values? Where is my time actually going? What am I still clinging to out of fear, even though it no longer belongs in my life? These questions cut. They are supposed to cut. Without that pain, there is no transformation. And yet, honesty brings freedom. When you know what matters, decisions become simple. You stop scattering your energy. You stop saying yes to things that secretly exhaust you. You stop building for applause and start building for alignment. Imagine the peace of waking up already knowing what to ignore. Imagine the power of being able to let noise pass you by because it does not serve your mission. That is what ruthless clarity gives you. It is easy to pretend we have clarity by surrounding ourselves with productivity systems, vision boards, or endless brainstorming sessions. But clarity is not a dream on a wall. It is a filter for your actions. If your daily life doesn't reflect what you say you value, then your clarity is fiction. Your calendar is your creed. Look at how you spend your hours, and you will see what your real priorities are. If family, health, or craft matter to you, they should have visible space in your day. If they do not, then your life is ruled by convenience, not by conviction. The reason people avoid defining purpose is because it demands sacrifice. Clarity forces you to say no. No to drama, no to distractions, no to the shallow comforts that erode depth. And saying no is uncomfortable, because it exposes what you are truly committed to. It strips away the excuse that you're just too busy. The truth is you are not too busy. You are unfocused. Brutal honesty doesn't let you hide behind that anymore. So tonight, or whenever you find yourself restless, sit down with a blank page. No music, no scrolling, just you and the questions. Write out in a single sentence what your life is really about. Then list 3 values you will not betray. Then look at your week and ask, where am I giving away energy that doesn't align with either of those? What can I cut right now? Not in theory, not next year, but today. Then take one bold action that proves your clarity. Send the message, cancel the commitment, begin the project, silence the noise by acting on what matters. This is not about building the perfect 5-year plan. The Stoics never believed in certainty about the future. What they did believe in was living today with such precision that the future could not help but be shaped by it. Your clarity is not about predicting outcomes. It is about directing energy. It is about narrowing your focus so your impact can widen. You don't become smaller by choosing. You become sharper. And sharp tools cut through noise. Repeat this as a declaration. I live with ruthless clarity. Let it echo in you until it becomes not just a phrase, but a standard. Because the world does not reward the vague. It rewards the aligned. The people you admire most are not always the loudest, but they are always the clearest. They know who they are, what they stand for, and what they refuse. And that is why they move with authority while the rest wander in circles. But clarity is fragile if your emotions remain unguarded. You may know your direction, but if you are constantly provoked, constantly hijacked by every insult or setback, then your clarity will scatter. That is why the next truth matters so deeply. To live with purpose, you must discipline your emotional boundaries. Without that armor, even the clearest mission will collapse under the weight of chaos. You may have found clarity about your purpose, but clarity alone will not protect you. Life will test it. People will push against it. The world will provoke you daily, not through monumental disasters, but through 1,000 little stings and insult, a delay, a rejection, an unexpected change. If you cannot discipline your emotional boundaries, every one of those stings will hijack your attention and scatter your focus. And that is how most people lose themselves. Not in one great collapse, but in a steady lake of emotional energy. The Stoics saw this with piercing accuracy. Epictetus reminded his students, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That means the insult itself is powerless until you grant it power. The delay is harmless until you decide it is tragedy. The failure is neutral until your interpretation brands it as proof of inadequacy." In other words, your emotions are not dictated by the world, they are created by your mind. That realization is terrifying because it strips away excuses, but it is also liberating because it hands you the key to freedom. Look around at modern culture and you'll see the opposite of Stoic strength. Outrage is currency. People are rewarded for reacting faster, louder, harsher. Social media thrives on offense, on the drama of constant indignation. But ask yourself, has anyone ever built a life of peace, clarity, and resilience by being at the mercy of every trigger? No. The people who move with authority, the ones you quietly respect, are not the loudest reactors. They're the ones who can stand still in the storm, feeling everything but controlled by nothing. That is the art of disciplined emotional boundaries. It is not suppression. It is not pretending you don't feel anger, envy, sadness, or fear. It is creating the sacred pause between stimulus and response. It is noticing the emotion rise but refusing to let it drive the car. It is the difference between acknowledging the fire and pouring gasoline on it. Imagine someone insults you. The instinct is to snap back, defend yourself, escalate. But what if you paused? What if you remembered that the insult reveals more about their character than your worth? What if you chose silence, or a calm response, or simply walking away? That is not weakness. That is strength. Because true power is not being untouchable, it is being unshaken. Or think about plans falling apart. Flights delayed, projects failing, people disappointing you. Most collapse under these moments. They complain, they panic, they lash out. But the Stoic adapts. They ask, what can I control? What lesson is here? How do I adjust with grace? The frustration still exists, but it doesn't rule them. They remain centered even as the world shifts. That is discipline. And discipline here does not mean coldness. It means proportion. It means treating each event according to its real weight. not magnifying it into catastrophe. The majority of emotional suffering is not caused by events, but by exaggerations, by making small things into everything. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This was not a slogan to him. It was a survival strategy while carrying the burdens of empire. Now, bring this closer to your life. How many times have you lost entire days because of one text, one email, one comment? How many times have you let your peace be stolen by someone who wasn't even in the room? This is what happens without emotional boundaries. You become a puppet whose strings are pulled by every circumstance. And the cost is not just wasted time. The cost is trust in yourself. Because deep down, you know you are not steering your own ship. The practice begins small. The next time anger rises, don't deny it, but don't act on it either. Name it silently. Breathe. Ask, what is this emotion trying to teach me? Is it worth my energy? What outcome do I want? That pause is your power. Or when envy strikes, don't shame yourself, but investigate it. Does their success threaten you, or does it reveal where you've been avoiding your own growth? Suddenly, envy transforms from poison into a compass. With repetition, something remarkable happens. People sense your stability. They notice you are not pulled into arguments or chaos. Insults bounce off you. Drama loses its grip. You start trusting yourself because you know, no matter what happens, you will not betray your peace. And that trust is priceless. This does not mean life becomes easy. Triggers still appear, old wounds still ache, but each time you hold the boundary, each time you pause instead of react, you weaken the grip of old patterns. You rewire your responses. You evolve. That is how warriors are built, not by eliminating emotion, but by mastering its influence. Practice silence when provoked. Practice walking away from bait. Practice holding your center while others flinch. These are not glamorous disciplines. No one applauds them, but they quietly transform you into someone who cannot be manipulated. Someone who does not give away control of their day to someone else's mood. So make this your code. I control my emotions. They do not control me. Repeat it, not as a boast, but as a vow. Because once you accept this, you become unshakable in a world addicted to reaction. You stop being a servant of impulse and start being a master of response. And once you own your reactions, you are ready for the next truth. Because clarity and emotional discipline mean nothing if you still live as though someone else will save you. The Stoics never tolerated that illusion. The fourth principle will confront you with the hardest but most liberating fact. No one is coming. Your life is yours, and total responsibility is the only path to power. No one is coming to save you. That sentence may sound harsh, but it is one of the most liberating truths you will ever accept. We spend so much of our lives secretly hoping that someone else will fix things, a mentor who will discover us, a boss who will finally see our value, a partner who will complete us, or even luck itself swooping in to change our story. But the Stoics cut through that illusion. They taught that your life is yours, and the sooner you claim complete responsibility for it, the sooner you will step into power. Most people never do this. They live in quiet blame. They point fingers at circumstances, at their upbringing, at the economy, at people who didn't believe in them. They create clever justifications for why they're stuck, broke, unhealthy, or unfulfilled. And because the excuses sound reasonable, they remain imprisoned by them. But blaming the world doesn't change the world, it only chains you to it. Every time you say, "I can't because of them," you hand them the steering wheel of your future. That isn't protection, that's surrender. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, understood this better than anyone. He taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we are always in command of how we respond. And our response is what shapes our reality. Notice the brilliance in that. He didn't tell his students that pain or injustice could be avoided. He told them that authority still belongs to them, because their interpretation and their action were always theirs. That is ownership. That is responsibility. Think about the stories you carry. We all have them. Stories that sound noble but keep us small. Stories like, I would be successful if I had more support. I would be confident if people believed in me. I would be healthier if I weren't so busy. They protect us from guilt, but they also prevent growth. The Stoic path demands that we shatter these narratives and stand in the discomfort of truth. Because when you finally admit, I created this reality through my choices, my habits, my avoidance, then you unlock the most important realization. If you created it, you can change it. Picture two people facing the same setback. One says, why is this happening to me? The other says, what can I learn from this? One waits, the other moves. One complains, the other adapts. The one who takes ownership will always outgrow the one who resists. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, never leaned on his status as an excuse. He reminded himself that suffering often lies not in the situation, but in how we interpret it. And if suffering is born from judgment, then we hold the power to alter it. So ask yourself, where in your life are you silently waiting for rescue instead of taking responsibility? Where are you blaming circumstances instead of changing your response? Where are you outsourcing your power to people who do not even think about you? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones. Because responsibility is the line that separates a victim from a creator. When you embrace responsibility, you don't deny mistakes. You own them. You admit when you fall short, when you lash out, when you avoid, when you fail. Not with self-hatred, but with integrity. And integrity is what builds unshakable self-respect. No one can weaponize your flaws against you if you've already claimed them. No one can hold your past over you when you've turned it into fuel. This is not about perfection. It's about claiming authorship of your life. Even when you stumble, you rise knowing the fall was yours, and so is the climb. Responsibility gives you that power. And something profound happens when you live this way. You stop needing permission. You stop begging for fairness. You stop waiting for shortcuts. You simply build, quietly, relentlessly, daily, until one day you become the person you once admired from a distance. And when people ask how you did it, you'll smile not because you were lucky, but because you were willing to own the work no one saw. Start practicing this shift today. Each time you feel a complaint rising, turn it into a question. Instead of why me, ask, what can I do about this? Instead of pointing fingers, point the thumb not because you are at fault, but because you are capable. Turn frustration into fuel. Turn disappointment into a lesson. Turn weakness into training. That is the Stoic path. It is not easy, but it forges warriors. So make this your declaration. I own my life fully and completely. Say it until it becomes your instinct. Because when you finally live as if everything depends on you, you discover that nothing can stop you. And with that foundation of ownership, we can move to the next lesson. Because once you stop blaming the world, there's another trap waiting. The constant urge to explain yourself, to justify your path to others. And that is where many people lose their momentum. The Stoics had no patience for that habit. They lived in alignment, not explanation. And that is exactly where we'll go next. You've taken responsibility. You've stopped waiting for rescue. Now comes a quieter, subtler challenge that drains more power than most people realize. The reflex to explain yourself. The need to justify every boundary, narrate every decision, and soften every choice until it becomes acceptable to people who are never going to live your life anyway. The Stoics had no appetite for that reflex. They believed your actions are your philosophy. Your results are your statement. When you live in alignment, explanation becomes optional. Notice how quickly the urge appears. You decline an invitation and immediately feel compelled to write a paragraph about how busy you are. You decide to wake earlier, train harder, spend evenings building your craft, and you begin rehearsing speeches for friends who might not understand. You change your diet, your schedule, or your company, and you think you owe the world a press release. But you don't. Most of that explaining is not about clarity. It's about comfort, managing other people's discomfort so you don't have to sit with your own. And every time you do it, you trade authority for approval. There's a reason this matters. Right after taking responsibility, ownership without silence becomes performative. You start building not for the mission, but for applause. You post progress updates as a way to borrow confidence from other people's reactions. You ask for constant validation because you haven't yet learned to draw strength from the work itself. The discipline here is to reverse that habit. Let the work be the proof. Build quietly enough that you can hear your own standard. Silence is not withdrawal. It's restraint. It's the ability to hold your center when the room wants a show. When you decline, you say, "No, thank you," and leave it there. When you commit, you do the work and let the outcome speak. When you set a boundary, you state it briefly and move on. That brevity is not rudeness, it's stewardship. You are protecting attention, the primary fuel of your purpose, from being spent on persuasion that doesn't move the mission. Think about the cost of over-explaining. Time you could spend reading, training, building, or resting gets poured into long messages that try to convince someone to endorse your path. Energy that should power your craft is burned soothing people who may never be satisfied. Focus that should be directed at the next right step is scattered across imaginary arguments in your head. This is how momentum dies, not in big failures, but in constant, tiny leaks of explanation. The modern world rewards noise. You're encouraged to narrate everything. Your goals, your plans, your reasons, your feelings about your reasons. But narration isn't creation. The more you broadcast, the more you become attached to being seen as the kind of person who does the work, instead of being the person who actually does it. Quiet flips that script. You become the type of person whose calendar is heavier than their captions. You measure by what shipped, not what you announced. There will be people who misunderstand your silence. They will project motives onto choices they can't categorize. They will say you changed, as if growth were betrayal. They will call you distant, when you are simply focused. Let them. You are not required to donate your piece to clear up every rumor or correct every slight. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial. The project of becoming does not pause so you can produce evidence for spectators. This doesn't mean you never speak. Integrity sometimes asks for explanation to a partner impacted by your schedule, to a team depending on your decisions. But even there, the Stoic standard applies. Be truthful, be concise, be done. No dramatics, no excuses, no performance. Explain what must be explained to those who are truly affected, then return to the work. The purpose of words is to align action, not to replace it. There is a deeper layer to this discipline. Over-explaining is often fear in disguise, fear of being disliked, fear of standing alone, fear that your new standard will cost you old relationships. That fear is understandable. Growth changes your orbit. Some people will no longer fit, and you will no longer fit in rooms built for who you used to be. Allow that grief, but don't bargain with it. You are not abandoning people. You are honoring the truth that you can't carry everyone and still climb. The practical practice is simple. Decide your standard in private. Write it, speak it to yourself. Then let your schedule, your environment, and your repetitions carry it into the world. When invitations arrive that don't fit, decline with kindness and without essays. When criticism comes, listen for a signal. If there's none, move on. When you stumble, own it briefly and correct course. When you succeed, keep building. Let your peace be loud and your explanations be scarce. You will notice changes quickly. Your mind quiets. Your to-do list shrinks to the essential. People learn to respect your boundaries because you present them without apology. Opportunities that require performance for approval lose their shine. The right allies find you those who recognize substance without constant narration, who value depth over display. The work compounds because you're no longer pausing to justify every brick you lay. There is also a kindness in this way of living. When you stop explaining, you stop trying to manage other people's judgments, and you grant them dignity to hold their own opinions. You stop campaigning for approval and start modeling conviction. That steadiness becomes a gift. It shows others that it's possible to live from standards instead of reactions, to choose the long path without making a spectacle of the journey. If you feel resistance, start small. For 1 week, practice brief boundaries. No, thank you. That doesn't fit my priorities. I'm focused on a deadline. Then close the message. Notice the urge to add 3 more sentences. Notice the anxiety that asks for reassurance. Breathe. Let the silence stand. Your nervous system will learn that you are safe without defense. Your work will thank you for every minute you return to it. Remember the old Stoic line, if it isn't right, don't do it. If it isn't true, don't say it. There's no third clause that reads, and if it is right and true, explain it until everyone approves. The code stops where alignment begins. Your life becomes your statement. Your consistency becomes your argument. Your outcomes become your endorsement. Make a vow to yourself now. I do not perform for permission. I choose alignment over explanation, results over reassurance, substance over show. Let that vow guide today's choices. A declined meeting, an hour of deep work, a quiet run at dawn, a single paragraph published instead of a thread about why you might write someday. One day at a time. This is how you build a life that no longer needs defending. And as your voice grows quieter on the outside, your inner voice grows stronger. You begin to trust that you will show up because you have been showing up. You begin to rely on discipline because it has become identity. That is the point of the silence, to make room for the work that makes you. From here, we move to the heart of stamina, how to rebuild discipline every single day, regardless of mood or circumstance, so your momentum doesn't just spark, it sustains. The next principle is the engine behind everything you've claimed so far. Discipline is not something you achieve once and then carry forever like a trophy on your shelf. Discipline is a muscle, and muscles weaken when you stop training them. That is why so many people experience short bursts of change, new routines, new habits, new commitments, only to collapse back into old patterns. They thought discipline was a switch, but it's really a practice. If you want to live with strength, you must reinforce discipline every single day. Think about how you brush your teeth. You don't wake up and say, I brushed yesterday, so I'm done for the week. Hygiene is daily. So is discipline. The disciplined person doesn't celebrate once and coast. They wake up and build it again, and again, and again. Not because they're obsessed with control, but because they understand a truth the undisciplined never see. Consistency is freedom. When you can trust yourself to show up, life becomes simpler. You don't debate every morning whether you will train, whether you will study, whether you will focus. The decision has already been made. The Stoics understood this long before modern science confirmed it. Marcus Aurelius didn't have habit trackers or alarm apps. What he had was a relentless internal accountability. He wrote in his journal each day not because he loved writing, but because he knew he could lose his edge if he didn't. Seneca reminded himself constantly that each moment could be wasted or used to sharpen the soul. They treated discipline like breathing. You don't brag about it. You just do it, because without it, everything else decays. This doesn't mean grinding 24 hours a day. The disciplined life is not about punishing yourself or squeezing joy out of existence. It is about honoring the promises you make to yourself, especially when no one else is watching. It is about finishing what you start, holding yourself to a higher standard even in the smallest actions. When you live this way, your confidence grows naturally, not because you shout affirmations, but because your behavior proves who you are. Everyone hears the same voice inside. You've done enough. You can skip today. You'll start again tomorrow. The difference between those who build lasting strength and those who drift is not whether that voice appears, but how they respond. The undisciplined person negotiates. The disciplined person acts. They move before motivation arrives, because they know motivation is a guest who rarely shows up. Momentum is built, not given. This is why discipline requires preparation. It begins before the action itself. What do your evenings look like? Are you preparing your priorities or collapsing into chaos? Do you wake with clarity or scramble into reaction? The disciplined person anticipates distraction before it comes. They set the stage so that the default option is the right one. They guard their time, design their environment, and define their values in advance. Willpower alone is fragile. Systems make strength sustainable. There's another truth here. Discipline grows not in dramatic moments, but in the ordinary repetitions. One more rep when your body says stop. One more page when your eyes grow tired. One more minute of focus when the distraction feels irresistible. Each small choice is a brick, and over time the wall of your character rises unshakable. People on the outside will call it talent, luck, or natural strength. You will know it was repetition, and yet, rest is part of discipline. To push without pause is not strength, but recklessness. The disciplined person rests strategically so they can return stronger. But they never confuse rest with quitting. They never use fatigue as a permanent excuse. They recover, then resume. That rhythm is what separates the curious from the committed. The curious dabble when convenient. The committed show up regardless. If you want to test yourself, try this for 1 week. Remove motivation from your vocabulary. Don't ask, "Do I feel like it?" Instead, ask, "What did I decide in advance?" When the alarm sounds, rise. When it's time to train, move. When it's time to study, begin. You'll discover something powerful. Action creates desire. Starting fuels momentum. The doing builds the drive. Waiting for a feeling before you act is like waiting for the ocean to calm before you sail. It will never happen. You sail anyway. So let this become your code. I rebuild my discipline every single day. Speak it until it sinks. Live it until it becomes instinct. Because the world will not reward your intentions. It will only respond to your consistency. When people wonder how you rose, you won't point to one big moment, you'll point to thousands of small ones, invisible to everyone but undeniable to you. That is the quiet power of daily reinforcement, and once you grasp this, you are ready for the next truth. Because even the strongest discipline can be wasted if it's directed toward battles you cannot win. The Stoics knew this well. Peace begins not only with effort, but with release. To truly live with strength, you must learn to let go of what you cannot control. That is the next step on this path. You've been rebuilding discipline day after day, and you can feel the gears catching. Less negotiation, more motion. But there's a limit to what force can accomplish. Push hard enough in the wrong place and you don't create progress. You create friction. The Stoics understood this boundary as clearly as they understood grit. Some things are up to us and some things are not. Freedom begins at the line where you stop wrestling with what was never yours to command. Look at how stress accumulates in modern life. A client delays payment and your stomach knots. Traffic turns your schedule upside down and your heart rate spikes. An algorithm changes and your numbers dip. Suddenly your mood dips with it. Someone's opinion, delivered carelessly, becomes your private prison for days. Notice the pattern. In each case, your energy floods into places where your hands cannot actually move the levers. This is not care. It is captivity. Control is heavy. Letting go is light. Letting go is not apathy. It is precision. It is choosing to care where care can compound your effort, your preparation, your character. Your focus while refusing to spend a single extra breath trying to coerce outcomes that were never within our. Epictetus taught his students to divide the world cleanly. What belongs to me? Judgment, desire, aversion, action, and what belongs to fate? Weather, markets, traffic, timelines, other people's choices. Every minute you confuse those categories, you suffer needlessly. Try a simple exercise. Take one situation that's currently bothering you. Write to columns, command and concern. In command, list only what you can do, prepare better. Send the follow-up, tighten the script, refine the product. Train your body, guard your mind, choose your words. In concern, list everything else. Their reply, the review, the algorithm, the timing, the rumor mill, the unexpected. Now, draw a line through the second column. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it isn't yours. Then take one visible step from the first column within the next 10 minutes. Feel how the mind steadies when action re-enters the frame. Negative visualization premeditatio malorum is one of the most practical tools here. You imagine setbacks in advance, not to darken your spirit, but to immunize it. The flight may be cancelled. The launch may stumble. The meeting may go cold. Fine. Who are you when that happens? How will you pivot? What's your default next move? If you've rehearsed the hit lands softer. You remain available to reason when others collapse into drama. And remember, influence is not control. Influence grows from presence, consistency, and credibility. It does not grow from grasping. If you're forcing, you're usually losing. Consider relationships. You cannot make someone mature on your timeline. You cannot control whether they understand your growth. You can state your boundary clearly, hold it consistently, and continue walking your path. That's influence. The outcome, how they respond, belongs to them. Release also means releasing the timeline. Your work may be good, but not yet. Your progress may be real, but not visible. The seed doesn't sprout because you yell at the soil. It sprouts because you plant, water, guard, and wait. If you can't wait, you don't have a growth problem. You have a control problem disguised as urgency. Let the process breathe. Keep your hands on your craft, not on the clock. There's a physiological layer to this practice. When uncertainty rises, your nervous system defaults to threat. The breath shortens, the mind races, the body contracts. Meet it with a pattern interrupt. Slow inhale, slower exhale. Count for in, 6 out, 10 rounds. Pair it with a sentence, I return to what I can command. Then choose the smallest controllable action available. 1 email, 1 paragraph, 1 set, 1 walk. The body calms when it senses agency. Consider a few common traps. You replay a conversation and rewrite your lines for an hour. You debate a stranger online who will never meet you halfway. You stock metrics that you cannot accelerate without meaningful work. All of this feels like effort, but it is only agitation. The cure is subtraction. Delete the thread, close the dashboard, place the phone in another room, and put your hands back on the lever that moves your life forward. Letting go does not mean you never fight. It means you stop shadowboxing with the wind. When the problem is systemic, you organize. When the feedback is signal, you adjust. When the loss is real, you grieve. Acceptance is not passivity, it is alignment. You point your strength where strength makes a difference. That's why the Stoics were fierce without being frantic. Their serenity was not the absence of storms. It was the mastery of sails. A nightly release audit can change your days. Ask 3 questions before bed. What did I carry today that wasn't mine? Where did I spend energy on outcomes instead of actions? What can I set down before I sleep? Write 1 sentence you're releasing. I release the need to control their response. I release the timeline. I release the rumor. Then write 1 sentence you're keeping. I keep my standard. I keep my preparation. I keep my morning routine. Wake up lighter. Sometimes letting go requires language in the moment. Try these cues. Not mine to hold. Return to role. Command, not concern. Whisper them when the wave rises. The words become handles your mind can grip when the slope gets slick. Then there's forgiveness, the heaviest thing to set down. Forgiveness does not declare that the harm was acceptable. It declares that your future is no longer collateral for someone else's choices. You release the right to replay the injury because replay is a poor investment of a powerful mind. You choose to carry wisdom forward, not bitterness. You are not forgetting. You're freeing your hands to build. On the other side of release is clarity. You stop taking things personally that were never personal. You stop mistaking urgency for importance. You leave rooms where your presence requires contortion. You discover how much creative energy returns when your attention is no longer handcuffed to what refuses to move. Paradoxically, results often improve because you're finally pouring everything into the narrow band where your effort compounds. Let this be your vow. I let go of what isn't mine to hold. Say it when the email arrives late. Say it when the meeting shifts time. Say it when the numbers wobble. Say it when the comment stings. Then turn back to your craft, your training, your study, your service. That is where your life is built, in the domain of command, not in the theater of concern. And as this discipline takes root, something beautiful happens to your presence. People feel steady around you. Teams sink to your calm. Your family trusts your weatherproofness. You become a lighthouse, fixed, clear, useful because you aren't blinking with every wave. That steadiness is not accidental. It's the fruit of daily release. From here, your silence grows stronger because you no longer spend it clutching outcomes. You spend it sharpening intention. Your willingness to choose discomfort becomes cleaner. Because pain without control is noise, but pain inside your role is training. Your mind becomes easier to guard because you stopped inviting chaos in the front door. This is the hinge on which the rest of the code turns. You can work hard forever, or you can work hard in the right place. Choose the second. Choose command over concern. Choose release. Silence is power. Not the kind of power that shouts, argues, or tries to win the room, but the kind that unnerves people because they cannot read it, cannot control it, cannot predict it. In a world addicted to noise, choosing silence is an act of rebellion, and yet it is also an act of profound self-mastery. The Stoics knew this long before our culture of constant broadcasting. Seneca, the founder of Stoicism, said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we may listen more and speak less." He was pointing to a truth that technology has only amplified. Most people weaken themselves by talking too much, too often, about things that don't matter. Look at the digital age. Every platform rewards immediacy, outrage, reaction. You are trained to have an opinion about everything, even things far outside your expertise. You are nudged to share constantly, to explain yourself, to jump into every debate. But when you are always speaking, you are rarely learning. When you are always explaining, you are rarely building. When you are always reacting, you are never directing. Silence reverses that imbalance. It returns you to the position of observer, strategist, and builder. Think about the last time someone insulted you and you resisted the urge to snap back. That silence unsettled them far more than your words would have. Why? Because silence denies them control. It refuses to meet their chaos on their terms. It forces them to reveal more of themselves while you conserve energy. This is why silence is not weakness. It is containment. It is the shield that keeps your focus intact and the weapon that allows clarity to emerge. There is a deeper discipline here. Silence teaches you to hear yourself. When you stop filling the air with explanations, you begin to notice your own motives, your own patterns, your own triggers. You can't observe while you are broadcasting. You can't sharpen awareness while drowning in your own voice. The Stoics practiced silence not because they lacked words, but because they wanted their words to matter. A sharp arrow is only sharp because it was not blunted in endless, careless use. Imagine yourself in a heated conversation. The other person grows louder, trying to bait you into a reaction. You remain calm, quiet, steady. Your silence disarms them. They keep talking, revealing insecurity, exposing contradictions, losing composure. All the while, you maintain presence without surrendering peace. That is authority. That is restraint in action. But silence is not just about confrontation. It's about conserving energy in the mundane. Not every meeting deserves your input. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every rumor deserves a correction. The undisciplined mind thinks every moment is a stage. The disciplined mind knows most stages are distractions. By holding your words, you preserve presence. You keep your attention for what matters. The beauty of silence is that it creates space, and space reveals truth. When you don't fill the air, others rush to do it. Their patterns emerge. Their motives become obvious. Their inconsistencies surface. And in that space, you gain intelligence. You learn who is trustworthy, who is careless, who is grounded, and who is fragile. Silence turns every room into a classroom if you're willing to stop being the teacher for a moment and start being the student. Yet silence requires courage. It requires comfort with being misunderstood. People may project arrogance onto your quiet. They may interpret your restraint as weakness. They may invent stories about why you didn't explain yourself. Let them. Your job is not to control the narrative others create. Your job is to remain aligned with your principles. If your integrity is intact, your silence is not absence, it is authority. Try this as practice. The next time you are tempted to justify yourself, pause. Ask, does this person truly need an explanation? Does my silence protect my focus more than my words? Will my energy be better spent in action than in argument? More often than not, the answer will guide you back into quiet strength. Silence is also one of the fastest ways to build trust with yourself. Every time you hold back words that would dilute your mission, you reinforce discipline. Every time you resist the urge to perform, you sharpen authenticity. Over time, people around you begin to notice not because you announce it, but because your presence feels steadier. They feel the weight of someone who is not frantically seeking validation. They sense the groundedness of a person who does not give away power for a free. Think about history. The most respected leaders were rarely the loudest in the room. They listened more than they spoke. They observed before they acted. And when they finally did speak, people listened because their words carried weight, distilled by restraint. That weight is what you cultivate each time you practice silence in your daily life. So adopt this mantra. My silence is not absence. It is authority. Repeat it until you believe it. Carry it into conversations, into arguments, into decisions. Use silence to guard your time, to sharpen your awareness, to unsettle those who thrive on chaos, and to amplify the power of your eventual words. Because silence is not retreat. It is strategy. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is not passivity, it is power-focused. And once you learn to hold your silence, you are ready for an even greater challenge. The world will tempt you with comfort, with ease, with convenience dressed as peace. But the Stoics were clear. Comfort is not peace, it is a golden cage. If you want to grow, you must choose discomfort on purpose. That is the next principle. Comfort is seductive. It whispers that you deserve to relax, that you've done enough, that life should be soft and effortless. And at first, it feels like a gift: warm beds, easy entertainment, food that requires no effort, routines that demand nothing of you. But what comfort rarely gives is strength. What it rarely builds is grit. And when the storm inevitably comes, comfort leaves you unprepared. The Stoics knew this deeply. They tested themselves against discomfort not because they were masochists, but because they understood that resilience is not born in luxury. It is forged in struggle. Think about your own life. Every great moment of growth probably came with a dose of discomfort. The workout that pushed you beyond your limit. The conversation you were afraid to have but had anyway. The risk you took when it was easier to stay safe. Growth and comfort do not coexist. Every time you choose convenience, you trade long-term strength for short-term ease. And you don't notice the trade in the moment. It feels small, harmless, even deserved. But over time, those trades accumulate, and suddenly you find yourself softer, less certain, less capable. Seneca advised his students to deliberately spend certain days living with the simplest food, the roughest clothes, and the barest surroundings, asking himself, "Is this the condition I feared?" He practiced poverty not because he lacked wealth, but because he refused to be owned by it. By choosing discomfort voluntarily, he built confidence that he could endure it involuntarily. That is the secret of the Stoic path. Hardship chosen in advance inoculates you against hardship imposed by fate. Now bring that to today. Modern life is engineered for convenience. Groceries delivered, entertainment on demand, answers available instantly. The world around you is designed to minimize effort. And while that saves time, it also erodes strength. You begin to believe that difficulty is abnormal, when in truth difficulty is the natural state of growth. So when challenge appears a failed project, a health crisis, a betrayal, you collapse, because you have trained yourself to avoid every form of friction. Discomfort is not punishment. It is training. The ache of a heavy set is your body learning strength. The nervousness before a presentation is your mind sharpening courage. The hunger during a fast is your will reclaiming authority from habit. The frustration of study is your brain rewiring for mastery. Every signal of discomfort is also a signal of transformation. The Stoics didn't chase pain for its own sake. They chased the person who emerged through it. So what does this look like in practice? It might mean waking earlier than you want to. It might mean tackling the hardest task first instead of pushing it to the end of the day. It might mean reading when you'd rather scroll, writing when you'd rather watch, training when you'd rather rest. It might mean having the conversation that terrifies you instead of continuing to avoid it. Each time you choose discomfort, you harden your edges. You remind yourself that your peace is not tied to things being easy, but to you being prepared. The danger of convenience is not just softness. It's addiction. The more you rely on comfort, the more you start to believe you cannot function without it. You convince yourself you need perfect conditions before you can create, that you need the right mood before you can move, that you need approval before you can act. But the truth is, you don't need any of those things. You only need courage to step into the friction. This is why deliberate discomfort must become a habit. Cold showers, long runs, fasting, speaking up, saying no whatever challenges you most. Not to punish yourself, but to inoculate yourself against fragility. Each voluntary hardship whispers to your nervous system, "I can endure." I am capable. I am not owned by ease, and when life delivers its inevitable trials, you are not shocked. You are ready. Ask yourself, what discomfort have you been avoiding that would change everything if you faced it consistently? Maybe it's your health, the weight you've been putting off confronting. Maybe it's your work, the project you've been postponing because you fear failure. Maybe it's your relationships, the boundaries you keep dodging because you fear rejection. Whatever it is, that is the training ground. That is where the next version of you is waiting. When you begin choosing discomfort, people may not understand. They will say you're extreme, obsessive, or unbalanced. Let them. They do not see the storm you're preparing for. They do not understand that peace is not found in the absence of challenge, but in the confidence that you can endure it. While they worship comfort, you are building armor. While they seek the easy path, you are walking a hard one, and in that hardness, you discover greatness. So make this your declaration. I choose the difficult path. I reject the easy one. Let those words settle into you, because once you embrace discomfort as a teacher, you stop fearing it as an enemy. You begin to welcome the moments that test you, because you know those are the moments shaping you. Every repetition of discomfort is another layer of strength. Every choice against convenience is another reminder that you are built for resilience. And this brings us to the mind itself. Because while the body and schedule can be trained through hardship, the mind is the true command center. If you allow the world's noise to infiltrate unchecked, all your discipline collapses. To walk the Stoic path fully, you must fortify your mind against intrusion. That is the next principle. Your mind is the command center of your entire life. Every choice, every reaction, every interpretation begins inside it. If the mind is weak, every discipline collapses. If the mind is fortified, even the harshest storms cannot shake you. The tragedy of modern life is that people guard their phones with passwords, lock their homes with alarms, and insure their possessions, yet leave their minds wide open to every form of intrusion. They scroll endlessly, consume noise without filter, and allow algorithms to colonize their thoughts. The result is predictable: confusion, envy, distraction, anxiety. The Stoics understood that the mind is sacred ground. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the quality of his thoughts determines the quality of his life. He wrote, "Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." That wasn't poetry, it was survival. Surrounded by war, disease, betrayal, and constant demands, he knew that if he allowed poison into his mind, the empire inside him would collapse. No matter how strong the empire outside appeared, look at your own mental diet. What are you feeding your mind? Hours of outrage disguised as news? Endless comparisons disguised as inspiration? Entertainment that leaves you numb rather than nourished? If you feed your body with junk, you expect sickness. If you feed your mind with junk, you should expect chaos. And yet many people wonder why they feel anxious, unmotivated, and distracted while spending their days marinating in negativity. The truth is simple. Your mind becomes what it consumes. So guard it. Protect your mornings like sacred time. Begin the day with clarity, not chaos. Before you open your phone, open your thoughts. Journal. Read something meaningful. Breathe. Move your body. The first impressions of the day set the tone for the hours that follow. Likewise, protect your evenings. Don't let your last thoughts be polluted by noise. Choose reflection, gratitude, or stillness before you sleep, so your mind can rest in order rather than in agitation. This is not about isolation, it is about filtration. You cannot avoid the world, but you can choose what deserves space in your head. You cannot stop people from shouting, but you can decide whether to invite their voices into your mind. You cannot control every headline, every rumor, every trend, but you can control your attention. And attention is life. Where it goes, your energy follows. Where your energy goes, your future grows. Train your mind the way a warrior sharpens a blade. Read what challenges you, not just what flatters you. Write to clarify, not to perform. Study to deepen, not to impress. Speak to yourself with respect, the way you would speak to a friend you admire. Catch the lies before they become beliefs. When the thought arrives whispering you're not enough, respond with action, not surrender. When the comparison creeps in, shift focus back to your craft. When fear tries to hijack you, breathe, slow down, and ask, what do I control right now? The Stoics also warned about subtle infiltration. Negativity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sounds like reason, when really it is resignation. Why bother? It's too late. It won't matter if you do not remain vigilant. Those seeds take root, and soon you find yourself living a life designed by doubt. A fortified mind cuts off the intruder before it settles in. It recognizes the difference between wisdom and worry, between caution and cowardice. This isn't about pretending everything is positive. It's about realism without surrender. The Stoic mind does not deny reality, but it refuses to hand over authority to despair. When hardship arrives, the fortified mind says, this is not the end. This is training. When betrayal cuts deep, it says, I can endure and I can choose my response. When uncertainty rises, it says, I cannot predict the outcome, but I can prepare myself. That inner conversation is the difference between collapse and composure. Build daily rituals to strengthen this fortress. 10 minutes of stillness, 10 pages of reading, 10 sentences of reflection. Move your body to move your mood. Limit shallow inputs and replace them with deeper ones. Surround yourself with people who sharpen your character rather than dull it. Audit your influences the way you would audit your finances. If a relationship, a feed, or a habit constantly withdraws from your strength, cut it off or set strict boundaries, and when you falter as everyone does, return immediately. Don't let one negative day become a negative week. Don't let one spiral become a story about who you are. A strong mind is not flawless. It is resilient. It returns to center quickly. It refuses to let temporary storms define permanent identity. So declare it with conviction. My mind is mine. I choose what stays, and I protect what matters. Let that declaration echo in you until it becomes automatic. Because once your mind is fortified, you stop being a prisoner of every headline, every opinion, every rumor. You stop being tossed around by the world's pace. You begin to move by principle instead of impulse, by truth instead of noise, and with that, the circle of Stoic strength closes. You began by refusing procrastination, by clarifying your purpose, by disciplining your emotions, by claiming total responsibility, by walking in silence, by choosing discomfort, and finally by fortifying the one place from which everything flows, the mind. These practices are not quick fixes. They are lifelong code. A compass when the world spins. A shield when chaos presses in. A mirror when you forget who you are. The next step is not more listening, it is practice. Build the fortress. Keep the gate. Protect the command center. And when the world tries to distract, rush, or define you, return to this truth. The strongest power you hold is the mind you choose to guard. You've walked through 10 principles, 10 disciplines that the Stoics carved out over centuries, not as theory, but as survival. You've heard the call to stop bargaining with procrastination, to sharpen ruthless clarity of purpose, to discipline your emotional boundaries, to embrace total responsibility, to stop explaining yourself, to reinforce discipline daily, to release what you cannot control, to wield silence as authority, to choose discomfort over convenience, and finally, to fortify your mind against intrusion. Notice how these principles connect. Each one is a chain link. Alone, they are strong. Together, they are unbreakable. They build a life not dependent on motivation, applause, or luck, but on the one resource always within your reach: your choices. The world will keep trying to sell you shortcuts. More hacks, more tricks, more dopamine disguised as progress. But you've already seen what that leads to: distraction, weakness, regret. The Stoic path is different. It is slower, it is heavier, it demands something from you every day, but it gives something back that shortcuts never will: peace, clarity, resilience, and the quiet pride of knowing you are living in alignment with your highest standard. So what happens now? You have a choice. You can let these words drift by like another piece of content, a spark that fades by tomorrow. Or you can act. Action is where transformation lives. If you only listen, you are entertained. If you apply, you are changed. Which path will you choose? The Stoics would tell you, start now, in the smallest way possible. Wake tomorrow and rise with purpose. Write down one sentence that defines your mission. Hold your tongue once when insulted. Take the harder option when ease tempts you. Choose one practice and live it. Not someday, but today. Then repeat it tomorrow. Over time, those repetitions become identity. That identity becomes destiny. And here is where I ask something of you. If this message struck something inside you, if it reminded you of the fire you've been ignoring, don't let it stay private. Declare it. Write in the comments. No more delay. I build my life now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because accountability isn't just about you, it's about becoming the kind of person whose life itself becomes evidence that change is possible. This is what we're building here at StoicCraft. Not a channel for empty motivation, but a code for living. A place where ancient wisdom collides with modern struggle, and together we forge something useful, practical, and shakeable. If you are ready to stop drifting, if you're ready to turn philosophy into practice, subscribe, stay with this community, and commit to the work. Every principle you've heard is another tool in your arsenal. Every video is another rep for the soul. And every day you apply them, you are building a life you will not need to escape from. So carry this forward. Refuse to negotiate with laziness. Live with ruthless clarity. Guard your peace. Own your path. Move quietly. Train discipline daily. Release what you cannot control. Let silence speak louder than words. Step into discomfort and fortify your mind until it becomes a fortress of reason and resilience. That is the Stoic way. That is your edge in a world that thrives on weakness. You already know what happens if you delay. You've lived that story before, so write a new one. Start today. Build your life now. And when the world tries to pull you back into distraction, remember this declaration: I move by reason, by discipline, by principle, by truth. I will not wait. I will not waste. I will not explain. I will build. If this resonates, join us, subscribe, and declare your commitment. Your future self is waiting. Don't keep them waiting any longer.